The climate and biodiversity crisis are the single biggest threats to the world and to farming, but not in the way that this motion would have you believe. The only way that farming will remain a viable livelihood for generations to come is if we take immediate measures to safeguard and protect our natural environment. The politicians who wrote this motion and those outside the chamber who are pushing the same anti-environmental narrative underestimate farmers. We desperately need to open up the conversation about the future of agriculture in this country, and the farming community knows that better than anyone else. There's an opportunity here for an exciting transformation of our farming model, but we have to be brave, and we have to be honest, and we have to have an open conversation about it. Honesty is key in this debate. It's no wonder farmers are afraid of what might happen to their family farms and their businesses, because the rural independents are failing to be honest with them. Scaremongering about culls is not honest. There's no proposed cull in cattle. It's cynical, political fiction designed to ramp up fear and to drum up votes. I am from one of the most rural constituencies in the country. I grew up on a farm, I still live on that farm, and I was working on the farm until I got into politics and came into the Dáil. And I, and many others like me, do not feel represented by the views expressed by the rural independents. I was raised on a small farm with a really small dairy herd, which would be impossible now due to decades of failed policies, which is one aspect of this motion that I do agree with. Pushing farmers into more and more intensive models of farming has not only resulted in the destruction of our biodiversity and our water quality, but also the destruction of so many small family farms around the country, which were once at the heart of our agricultural model. The government's current policy prioritises economic output over environmental protection and still fails to provide proper compensation to large parts of the farming community. We need to have a sustainable and successful agricultural sector to fight the threats of the climate crisis, and to have that, we have to fix this imbalance. We can't continue to focus on headline-grabbing national herd numbers and not talk about beef prices, the impacts of fertilisers, the cost of fertilisers. If farmers were guaranteed fair prices for the cattle they raised to the highest quality, there wouldn't be the same need for more cattle. We need to reform the meat processing sector, including a statutory beef regulator, which many of us have consistently called for, who can clean up the industry once and for all. The Beef Tribunal in the early 90s highlighted widespread improper relationships between the beef industry and the government. It also stressed the lack of regulation and the massive impact that that had on the sector. Today, 30 years later, what has actually changed? The system is still designed to enrich the beef barons, while small farms fade away and young farmers have no choice but to pursue other careers. We need to shift to a more sustainable model of farming, and part of that is a need to gradually reduce the number of cattle in a way that doesn't reduce farmers' income. The same department which incentivised farmers to increase their herds exponentially must incentivise farmers to reduce them. Farmers have to be compensated as part of a just transition. There needs to be a guaranteed income stream and alternative profitable schemes available to them, such as forestry and horticulture. Schemes that produce food in a fair way, that sequester carbon and protect biodiversity. There are alternative types of farming which are profitable and are more sustainable. We are genuinely so lucky to have so many options to turn to in order to reduce our agricultural emissions without reducing our income if we do it right. And ultimately, we have to reduce our emissions. It is the overwhelming view of the scientific community that the agricultural sector will need to reduce emissions by 30% before 2030. Pushing back against that in order to keep the status quo will only cause extreme harm to the farming community in the long run, a reality that the government and the rural independents seem to refuse to acknowledge. If we don't take hard decisions now, they will inevitably be made closer to the 2030 target date. That will mean a sudden and very difficult transition for family farms around the country. To avoid that, we have to start now. Why would we choose to walk farmers to that cliff edge? We all recognise the potential of forestry in addressing our climate targets. However, farmers and landowners continue to be swayed by government policy into emission-generating areas of agriculture. That's really evident in the sectoral targets of the Department of Agriculture and how they prioritise them. The ambitious milk target in Food Harvest 2020 was met in 2017, and the beef target was met in 2011. However, at its highest, only 50% of the forestry target was ever reached. Today, it's closer to 20%. There are already cultural and logistical barriers to planting trees on farmland, and instead of working with farmers to overcome them, the government, the department, continues to actively, through other policies, push more families towards dairy, while the same incentives are not there for the likes of tillage or horticulture. Despite the fact that forestry provides a better financial return than livestock on lots of marginal land, more than half of the cattle and sheep farms in the country would be better off with forestry. But there's a drought of ambition for government to actually encourage that transition on those farms. Tillage farmers are finding it increasingly difficult to rent land, as other farmers, especially those adjusting to the changes in the nitrates derogation, have the capacity to pay so much more to lease land. Tillage farmers cannot compete and are being priced out, and then we're importing feed for cattle from South America and food from all over the world. We need interventions to enable the tillage sector to compete in renting land, so you need to address the policies that are forcing farmers to rent more and more land, not necessarily to even use it, just to apply more nitrates on the land that they're already using. We need to have a candid and honest conversation about the nitrates derogation. There is a false assumption that this is an essential policy for rural Ireland. My focus is ensuring the viability of family farms and promoting sustainable agriculture. In many ways, the derogation is an obstacle to these goals. The nitrates derogation needs to be phased out in a fair and orderly way. Ireland is one of only 3 countries with this arrangement, and it's likely that the European Commission will not extend the derogation past 2025. The government should be putting in place plans now to actually help family farms who may be adversely impacted. I'm concerned with small farms. The farmer with 40 or 50 cattle should not be treated the same as those with over 400 or 500. The department needs to put in place targeted supports to help family farms whose viability may be affected by changes to the derogation. Unless the Minister for Agriculture takes responsibility for the decision to ensure a fair transition now, he's taking the risk of leading many farms to a cliff edge in 2025. The government needs to support more sustainable farming models rather than forcing farmers into more intensive methods just to make ends meet. This results in farming communities being blamed for poor government policy and being pitted against each other, and there is a massive negative impact on the environment. I think it's honestly, I'll just finish on, quite frankly disgraceful that in 2023 elected representatives are basically debating whether or not we should take the necessary climate action rather than trying to figure out how we do that in a fair way. Farmers deserve better, more engagement, and they deserve more honesty.